Hello and welcome to another episode of 1000 Actually Fun Books, and where we review books of every genre. Today we are reviewing a science fiction book called Leviathan Wakes by James Corey. This is the first of the Expanse series, and I believe that I don't know, it's Netflix or Amazon or somebody did a TV series based on this. Maybe it's a mini series. I don't know. I've never watched it, but there's a whole bunch of books in this, and they're very popular. All right, our plot. So this actually, it almost reminds me of a mystery, more couched in science fiction, but a mystery. So what happens is at the very beginning, you're following along one of two threads. You've got two people that you follow. One is Holden. He is part of a ship. He's the XO of a ice hauler out in the solar system. So our ice hauler is getting something from the rings of Saturn, a chunk of ice, and gonna haul it back to where some colonists in the asteroid belt or farther afield need the water. No big deal. So he's part of this, and they discover a ship emitting a distress signal. In the process of trying to help this ship, his original ice hauler is blown up. Like somebody comes up out of the blue and just vaporizes their ship, and they're like, he's in a little shuttle by him with just a couple other of his crewmates, and they're all like, what? Why would they do that? I mean, we're just a little ice hauler. We're nobody. Why would you attack us with a military vessel of some variety? They have no idea what's going on. So one thread is following Holden as he tries to unravel really the mystery behind this. Because there's a whole bunch of different factions going on in the solar system. We've got Earth, we've got Mars, we've got Luna, which is the moon. We've got different outer meteoroid colonists, and they all basically have their own side to this. Who wants to be doing what and why. So he's looking at that going, well, is it these people? Are they the ones responsible for this? And then, but what would be the motivation? Why is this happening? So it's an unraveling story of what was going on behind the entire thing. It ends up being a huge solar system-wide mess. And so you follow him unraveling this, and then how to fix the problem, which I'm trying to give you very, very, very little spoilers on this, because I went to this book not knowing anything about the story and was really kind of surprised at all the different revelations. Like, I'm going along, okay, this is how I expected to go, and oh no, that's not how it went. And go along, oh, I think this is how it's going to go. Oh no, that's not how it went. It kept repeatedly surprising me because I didn't have spoilers. So I'm trying to keep this very spoiler-free. Okay, so you have Holden as one thread. Your second thread is very different. You have a man named Miller. So he is a colonist on one of the, they call them belters. So it's not a planetary system. It's on one of the, originally an asteroid colonist or a planetary moon or something like that out there. So he is on a system, and he's part of the security. And he's just, really, it pictures very strongly a noir detective. Think, you almost want to picture him with a fedora in black and white, everything is in black and white around him as he's smoking a cigar, being like, yeah, he's a pessimistic, kind of down on your luck kind of guy, and so you follow him. He starts out as security, and the mess starts happening in the solar system. And he's kind of like, okay, I'll just continue doing my job. And he's assigned to track down a missing girl. Anyway, in the event of doing this, he discovers a lot about this girl, and he really ends up liking who this person is, even though he's never met her. And he gets sidetracked because of the interplanetary solar system issues, but he keeps doggedly holding on to this mystery of what happened to this girl. And it ends up the two storylines, Holden with the interstellar mess and Miller with this missing girl, end up meeting up about halfway through the story, and then you find out, how they interact, because they're very different people, and how this ends up impacting the entire solar system eventually. And I will say this book did not end on a cliffhanger. Like, you could read this book and be completely satisfied going, oh yes, okay, everything is, tied up nicely in a bow. Although there are a couple threads that you're like, I could see how this could make more stories, but I'm not sure where they would be going with that. But it was interesting, very interesting. Okay, the things I liked. So the world building. So this has, like I said, a bunch of different factions, and it feels like a busy, very human mess out there with a bunch of people, all trying to vie for their best interests, their own, right? And it's messy, and it's not necessarily everybody having a righteous motivation, right? They're selfish and doing their own thing, and I liked how real that felt. I liked the hard sci-fi aspect of this too. There's a lot of things about this that you can tell the author really did a lot of research on how the lack of gravity would affect the human body potentially, or different aspects of space and the dangers of space and how that could impact people, and how space travel could work theoretically. And anyway, the hard sci-fi and the world building of this, all the different politics going on, was really well done. Very good. It isn't a happy sci-fi. This is not, like, I tend to think of Star Trek as being a very optimistic sci-fi. This is a much more grounded in real life sci-fi. So you have slums and brothels and, gambling dens and people just being nasty people. Although it doesn't really delve too deeply into those things. It's definitely there on the peripheral of the story. Okay, our characters, especially our two main characters. So the chapters alternate, whether it's Holden or Miller, and they feel very different people. Holden is an optimistic, idealistic kind of guy, and Miller is a pessimist, realist, kind of a depressed guy, and with some psychosis. And you can see that they just feel very different, and it's really interesting. The alternating back and forth between the chapters, you are, at least for me, I didn't have any issue with that at all. Because sometimes with alternating points of view, when they're very different stories, you can feel like, well, I'm really interested in this story, not that story over there. And that was never the case on this. It really was very interesting for both sides of the story, where you were like, oh, that's interesting what's going on with them, and that's interesting what's going on with them. So anyway, the character building was very good. You didn't feel like if the author offed one of the characters, you'd be, crying about it. But you ended up feeling like they were real people. Not necessarily always super sympathetic or likable in every respect, but you got to know them really well and felt that they were more than just two-dimensional characters. So the character building was good. The plot is really the meat of this story. So this really isn't all about the action like I've had some books. It's not all about the characters. It's not about the humor or whatever. This is all about the plot. And the plot was fantastic. The author did an amazing job weaving the mystery through and having a whole bunch of good pacing on dropping new revelations on what's going on. You think it's one thing, and then here's a little twist on that, and a little farther twist, and maybe you completely revise what you're thinking. It just keeps going on revealing what's really happening and why and what should they do about it. So there was a whole bunch of plot development on this that the author handled brilliantly. The pacing, like I said, was just really, really good. That isn't to say, though, it isn't lacking on action. It definitely had action, quite a few action scenes, whether it was running away from zombies, so to speak, whether it was running away in a space battle, there were several space battles, whether it was, a shootout somehow, or whatever it was. There were lots of action scenes, but they were really well paced. So it was high adrenaline rush and then kind of calm down and recover from that. And there was some realistic recovery. You kind of feel like there was, it wasn't one of those things where somebody gets shot and they just like walk it off. No big deal. Instead, you felt like there was deep consequences, lifelong lasting consequences if somebody got injured. So they did a great job with the action. The humor. So the humor was also good in this. This was not a comedy by any means, but they're definitely sprinkled throughout were lighthearted, bantering, segue moments, and they were genuinely funny. I'll give you an example. I won't read it because I can't remember what page it was on, but I found it really funny. So the good guys confront a bad guy, and this guy is pretty much revealed to be super evil. And I won't give you any details about why, but super evil, right? And he's trying to persuade the good guys onto his point of view. So he's like, here, look at the grand big picture. Look at how much good I'm doing. Don't you agree with what I'm doing? That kind of thing. And the good guy says something along the lines of, so you're offering me the whole kingdom if only I can worship you. And the bad guy turns to him and is like, I don't understand that reference. And I thought it was hilarious. It just cuts off there. It's not, going into it. But I thought it was hilarious because not just the implication there, because the good guy is basically saying you're Satan, is what he's saying, and you're trying to tempt me into evil. And the bad guy doesn't get the reference, which is ironically amusing because, Satan obviously wouldn't have read the Bible. Anyway, at least, implication there. Somebody who's satanic, we'll say, would not have read the Bible. Anyway, it was pretty darn funny. And there are a bunch of things like that. This one, it's not religious in any respect, but there are lots of little funny things where somebody says something and it's just a one-liner throw out there. Anyway, the author did a good job on that. It's got a good level of humor to really break up how serious some of the rest of it is. I will say our main characters, kind of coming back to character development, our main characters are very flawed. None of the characters are like Superman, where they're, have all the skills and so brilliant and have all the answers. No. All of them are flawed in real ways. So that kind of really helped with the character development to relate to them, because you're like, oh yeah, these feel like real people. They don't feel cardboard cut out. All right, let's see. I'm looking at my notes. Okay. There's really a huge amount of a huge amount. This is an excellent book. Excellent. The couple of things that I'll say, very minor, that verge on dislike, kinda. They're not bad, they just are what they are. One of which would be, there's rank prejudice in this book. Now, this is a sci-fi book, so it's not real prejudice. It's not anti-Semitism or, something to do with race or anything like that. No, it is a sci-fi prejudice. So the people who live out in the belt, the asteroid belt, on little space stations are really prejudiced against the Martian and Earth people. And they're like, oh, those inner colony people, those high gravity people, ugh. And the reverse is also true. So there seems to be this strong prejudice, and it's throughout the book. It's a very big in this book on those tensions between the prejudice groups and how that affects different people and the plot. So it's not really fun, however, to read about people being prejudiced, even if it is an imaginary prejudice. So it's a minor thing. The second thing I'll say is there's some grossness factor here. Grossness in human body disfigurement, we'll say, and a little bit also dealing with slums. As you can imagine, in slums, there's a little bit of grossness on thinking about trafficking and brothels. So the grossness factor isn't a big deal, but it is there. And I would consider this book, generally speaking, PG-13, except in the grossness factor, it bumps it up to an R. So this is definitely an R-rated book. It doesn't have any sexually explicit anything, despite, again, constantly referring to stuff like that. The sexual situations would definitely be PG-13. Lots of innuendo, more so than anything out there, rated R. My overall opinion on this is really, really good. Excellent, highly recommended. This was a fantastic book that was really well written. It's the kind of book that you come across and kind of go, wow, this guy did a great job with this. I'm really impressed. So I highly recommend it. If you, and not just science fiction. This is not just a good science fiction. It's just a good book in general. I'm going to say my next book is going to be A Little Princess by Frances Burnett. So this is a classic children's book, very short. It's only like 110 pages. And they've done several movies based on this. There was a black and white Shirley Temple book or movie made in like the 40s that I vaguely remember seeing. So anyway, we're going to do this next, and I hope you will join me. Thank you for watching.